Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dying Your Way podcast. And as usual, I have another fascinating guest to be with us today. Her name is Jill Brattain. She is from Indiana in the United States, and you'll get to know her and see what an amazing woman she is. But I think more than anything, she would say that she's the wife of Dave. Dave died in 2019 of ALS. And this is, I think you could say, a rare disease, but boy, you know, people like Stephen Hawking and Lou Gehrig, you know, who have kind of put this disease in the forefront. And it's a motor neuron disease, and it is devastating. It is life-threatening, it's terminal, and it's a journey once you get that diagnosis. And Jill is just an incredible ALS advocate and volunteer for many different organizations. She's a board member. She's got a private Facebook group. She is really, really involved in taking her pain and her lessons learned that she went through to really support others. And I just really am very impressed with who she is and what she's doing. And now I'm really happy to introduce her to you. She is amazing. So welcome, Jill. Welcome to the Dying Your Way podcast. It's so wonderful to see you and have you on the show.
Claire, thank you so much for allowing me to join your fabulous podcast and just relate some information to people and get the word out about this just really horrendous, devastating disease that needs us to point an eye to and know that we can make a difference if we all get on board with this.
So I of course want you to let us know more about the disease itself, but before we even go there, just tell us about Dave. I want to know about Dave.
Yeah, that's really one of my favorite subjects.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to do that. He was kind and generous, amazing. We met young, built a business together, had 3 beautiful children together, volunteered, and just really were enjoying our lives and our time together and giving back to community and people as much as we possibly could. And then in 2015, he was diagnosed with ALS. And I always tell people, when you're diagnosed, you certainly have one of 2 ways you can go. ALS is 100% fatal. The life expectancy is 3 to 5 years. And you have every right to be angry and bitter and it's a difficult thing.
Sure.
But Dave, in his uncanny ability, just used it as a platform to reach more people, to bring awareness, and just handled it with all the grace and compassion that I have ever seen, which obviously made me respect and love him even more. He just is an amazing guy, and I am proud and honored to keep that legacy going and to continue this fight.
Yeah, and it is a fight. You know, the whole warrior terms we use when people are facing a life-threatening illnesses about keep up the good fight, and he's a fighter and everything. And there are some diseases that, like you say, there is no hope and there is no cure right now. And it's no mark on anyone's character or personality if they don't just hop up and get well from the disease. That's not going to happen. So right. I really tell us what is ALS and why Dave?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think many people all over the world ask the same thing. ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, is a neuron disease. And the neurons are the things that communicate your brain to your muscles. So there are a lot of muscles that we think of. I want to raise my hand. I want to pick something up. But there are also just as many muscles we don't think of. I breathe, I swallow, and all of these are affected by ALS.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, what is not necessarily affected is your mind. So if you can imagine, it's just so tragic that you are losing function literally day by day, but you are still completely aware. So at some point, you're going to lose your voice. You're going to lose your ability to swallow. You're going to lose your ability to move at all, but you are still 100% there. And I should say too, you still have feeling. So when someone touches you, when something happens, you know, yet you can't communicate those things. So I think that is one of the most devastating things about this disease is you are literally locked in your body. And most of us cannot even imagine what that is. Dave once said to me, he was out on our back deck, and his started in his arms and hands, so he quickly lost use of those. And he had a power wheelchair, which he operated by his foot, and had taken it outside and called to me. And so I went out there and I said, you know what is it? And he said, there's something crawling on me somewhere. It is driving me crazy. There's nothing I can do about it. I don't know a better definition of maddening than that. And that's just tough. That's tough for him. It's tough for a caregiver to know that, wow, how do you deal with this every day?
Yeah. Yeah. But why do you think it was Dave? I mean, I did read that there was, for what, 10%, there's a genetic component. Was it genetic for him?
No, it was not. He was part of the 90% that is sporadic, but I will say that his connection, if you can call it a connection, to ALS is that he was an Army veteran. And in the United States, military are twice as likely to get ALS as a regular non-military person. And recently, as last year, they reevaluated that and the numbers have gone way up. If you were in the Air Force, you're 6 times as likely. If you're in the Army, you're 4 times as likely. So something, and our Veterans Administration does recognize this as a service-connected disease. So something in their military career has exposed them, and in a way, I assume they were predisposed. It's like winning the most horrendous lottery that you would never want to win. And so that's his connection. Now, given that connection, our medical care was given through the Veterans Administration local hospital, and they were amazing. I can't say enough about them. In the disease of ALS, there are 2 drugs that have been approved. Those drugs can possibly add a few months to your life. So what they do is just make you as comfortable as possible, do as much as they can to make your home easily accessible. For us, the most important thing was keeping Dave's independence. So we converted our house to be voice activated. Felt like living in, the new world. He could open doors with his voice and turn on the TV and lights and fans and call people and obviously surf the computer and things like that. And they're amazing. They're amazing about those things. But if you're not part of the Veterans Administration, you don't have that support. You have to look for that on your own. And that is another level of just frustration and devastation for people.
Wow. Okay. So backing up a little bit, when he started having symptoms and when, how long did it take from the time when he started having symptoms to when he got a diagnosis? I know from the time of diagnosis, it was about 4 years or 4.5 years before he passed away.
Yeah, it was 3.5 years before he passed away. And he was a bit of an exception through some incredible circumstances. And that's another difficult thing about ALS. It usually takes so long to get diagnosed that by the time they affirm the diagnosis, because it's a diagnosis of ruling everything else out. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not a pinched nerve, it's not MS, it's not, there's just so many other things. So as it progresses, it becomes more apparent. But unfortunately, by the time you can diagnose that, it's progressed to the point that you're in a difficult situation.
Yeah.
And Dave noticed some weakness in his hand and arm in the summer of 2014, and immediately said something to me. And we immediately went to his primary care physician, and he said, "I think it's a pinched nerve. Why don't you go to a spinal specialist and take a look?" And you know, all these doctors only have the information that they've been given for their parameters. So right. ALS is a rare disease, and it's never a diagnosis you want to give someone. So they do want to be cautious about this. So we went to the spinal doctor, and he said, "Yeah, it could be a pinched nerve. It is acting like that. Let's just give it some time and see how it goes." Well, thank God, in the meantime, our oldest son, who was studying kinesiology, said, "I don't think it's a pinched nerve, Dad. I think you should go to a neurologist, and I think you ought to just rule out some difficult things." And I think he had a sense at that time.
Your son.
Our son. So we did. And there's a test called an EMG, which they measure the muscles and the signals those muscles are getting and their reaction time. Mm-hmm. And when they did that EMG, they did the test, said, "We'll have results in a week, go home, we'll let you know." They called us back to the office the next day and said, "I have never," the poor neurologist, bless his heart, he was young and he had to give this devastating diagnosis, and he had never done it before. He said, "This is my first time diagnosing this." And he said, I want you to go to Mayo Clinic and have a second opinion." But it just,
did he go?
Yeah. We went to Mayo, and they were amazing and did a whole battery of tests, and also gave us some incredible advice about stay ahead of this disease. Order your wheelchair, order home remodel, be aware of getting a feeding tube, the best thing you can do for yourself is try and stay as far ahead of this as possible so you can remain independent and comfortable through this, just, I hate to say it this way, but process of slowly dying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so it sounds like Dave was really lucky to get the medical care that he got. Mayo Clinic, my goodness, and the VA. That's what we do, is we work with people that have different, life-threatening illnesses. And boy, what it takes to get people to do this kind of preparation and planning, it's hard to get people to the point of accepting the reality of something that is potentially life-threatening.
Yeah.
It sounds like that he got the medical support to tell him to do the things that it's hard for people to go there. But so anyway, he gets the diagnosis, you do the preparation, he's under the VA care. So what kind of palliative care, when I say palliative care, I mean social, mental, not just end of life care, but what kind of care did he get that was beyond just medical support?
Yeah, that's something that I think we are lacking in the ALS community. We need more of that. Humans are such amazing creatures. I think even giving a terminal diagnosis, you say, well, we'll be the one that beats this. We'll be the one, your spirit just says, we can do this. We've done so many other things. And then just as you so well put it, time goes by and you slowly come to that realization. In our case, we had someone that I can classify no less than an angel, named Leah Darling, who was our social worker at the VA. Mm. And she really concentrated on, hey, this is going to be rough mentally and stressful for you and for Dave. And I can only give you the advice of seeing so many other people go through this. And that is, have moments that matter. You know, make your life these next few years, however long you have, be intentional and take time and enjoy each other and make those memories that now I can easily say sustain me. And I can look back and say, it wasn't ALS for the last 3.5 years of his life. It was Dave. We had challenges. It took 2 of us to get him dressed and to feed him and things like that. But we had joy in those days too. And that's important.
So was it the nursing staff or the medical staff or the social worker, or who was it that was anticipating the transitions that were going to happen before they happened?
Yeah, it was the whole clinic. And our clinic is made up of course, our neurologist, and then Leah was our social worker. And then we had a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, a respiratory doctor, a nutritionist, as well as someone who is specifically based in swallowing and speech. And then we had what's called durable medical equipment person. And if you would just come in and say, you know, it's getting harder to do this, they would have a myriad of solutions and say, okay, shall we try this? Shall we try that? I think it's time to think about this. They work together as a team just incredibly. And at first, Claire, it was interesting to me because I thought, wow, they've really done well at this. And, you know, so people who have ALS are getting well taken care of and everyone is having such a great experience like we are. Wow, we were really the exception. We are the exception.
Really? And was it just because of the VA where you were, or was it all of the VA? Or, I mean, I just want to stop right here because you just named off about 10 different people that were part of your team. And I would put you on that team, certainly, your family on that team, and Dave as the team leader. And it took literally all of you to make it be as positive of an experience. And that to me is what true palliative care is that interdisciplinary. Okay, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you, but it blew me away that you just named, you know, a dozen people that were part of his team.
Yeah. And I'll go a step further. You know, these people, all of those professionals volunteer to be part of this clinic. You know, this is not their full-time job. They have a full-time job. They see other patients, but they volunteer to be part of this ALS clinic. And I feel this is unique to our Indianapolis VA. Just an amazing team led by Leah that just does amazing things and will just devote themselves to you. As I learn more and more about just this country is my area that I learn about, there are clinics that don't even have a team. You see one neurologist and then you're on your own. So you get a hold of an organization and hope that maybe they can tell you, or you go on Facebook and join some groups and say, hey, my husband's having trouble gripping things. And I can jump on that group then and I can say, oh, where there's a foam device that you can put on utensils that'll make it easier for him to handle because we want him to keep his independence as much as possible. So, you know, that's part of the movement now is that there are former caregivers and current caregivers out there that want to share these things and help you along the way because our medical system is not able to do that.
Well, it just hasn't been led, you know, with a vision to do that. I mean, I think there's some that are really like, you know, crying in the wilderness, trying to the Michael Fratkins of the world. And I mean, there are people that are out there that know all of this and work this way, but it's just not enough. And
Absolutely.
as you're talking, you know, I know you're focused on the ALS community, but I'm thinking about the lessons that can be learned from the ALS community for anybody, whether you have, you know, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or, you know, a lot of these degenerative diseases, you know, need the same kind of support. You know, it's just maybe there's safety in numbers and coming together, but I think that your experience is so unique in what it has to offer for others that are going through degenerative diseases.
Well, and I think you said it best. It's community. You otherwise you are isolated and you're devastated, you're isolated, and you have no idea what to do and where to turn. So you not only need that community to help you navigate, but you really need that community to let you know you're not alone. We've been through this. We will help you through this. You don't have to keep reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people do. We all search the internet. We all try and find the latest things, the greatest things. But for everyone, that is time, precious, precious time that is spent doing those things when they could be, as I said before, making memories and moments that matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard other people that I've talked to talk about that precious time that is so, so important. So what kind of, I mean, if you don't mind just talking about the time from when he was functioning to the point where he became in a terminal condition, was he able to die at home? What was that actual last few weeks like for you, for him?
Well, again, I don't know why this is, but our story is very unique. Typically, with ALS, as I said, you progress to the point where you are in somewhat of a locked-in state. Hospice is called, and I hope for most people they can pass peacefully at home. That was not the case for us. Dave was still walking, but very fatigued. So he used his power wheelchair to save his energy, but was still able to communicate, was still eating on his own. And in January of 2019, he came down with a mild case of pneumonia. And that's difficult for ALS patients because coughing is a muscle. Your diaphragm is a muscle. And so we went into the hospital, the VA hospital, and saw our doctors, and they said, you know, a mild course of antibiotics, supportive care, you should be here no longer than 2 or 3 days. Unfortunately, on the second day, he suffered a epileptic seizure and was placed on a ventilator. The next day, they were able to extubate him because his heart was fine, his lungs were clearing and operating fine. And he said to me, and I will never forget this, this is a quote, and again, I don't know who it's from, but he said, you know, you can live 30 days without food, you can live 3 days without water, but you can't live 30 seconds without hope. And I think that was his way of saying to me, I'm done with this fight. And he suffered another horrible seizure and passed.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about these. I'm just always so humbled, you know, it's just humbling, you know, what you go through and what people go through. And and that you've gone through this, and it does take a toll on the primary caregiver and the family too. I mean, so how did you get through the aftermath of all of that?
Well, we have 3 incredible kids, the oldest of which at the time was 29 and the youngest 24. Our 2 sons live out of state, and really We called them at midnight the night before when he was intubated, and they dropped everything. One of our sons is in the military. Here in the United States, you call the Red Cross. They were incredible. Got him on the first flight, got him home. All the kids, and when I say kids, all of our kids were married. And so we call them our in-loves, because love brought them to us instead of the law.
Yeah.
And so they were all able to be there, except our daughter-in-law, Sierra, that was taking care of the kids at home, their kids. And, you know, we're a very close-knit family, and they adore their dad. They saw that Dave and I respected and adored each other, and I think that model showed them, and they have been an incredible amount of support to me. They have been the thing that reminds me of him every time I look at them. They have been the ones that constantly talk about him. He is still alive and well in all of our minds. And every time we get together, we were just all together for a family vacation about a month ago. And we have added 3 new little ones to the mix. So we're growing, and we're loving. And I feel like we are a tribute to an amazing man. And I think that's the best thing you can do.
Well, and you've turned this journey into just such a positive thing for other people with the work that you do. Tell us a little bit about the volunteer work that you do, and you've started some founding things. So just tell us about what it is that you do, you know.
Well, you know, after Dave passed, I think it was really in our nature as a couple to volunteer and to help and to be maybe a voice of hope for people who are feeling hopeless. And that is true across the board in many, many situations. So I knew I wanted to do something. I just didn't know where the pull lied. And at first, it still does. The pull for me is for former caregivers. You know, we are supported when we are going through it. We are exhausted, but we would never change that. We all will say to you, I would give up everything to be a caregiver again. It's difficult. And then, like we talked about before, when it's all said and done, they come and remove all the equipment. They remove all the reminders of that life for the last 3.5 years, and you're alone, really utterly alone. So I started a Facebook group called Still Standing, where, and I feel that way. I feel like I'm still standing. I'm still standing for Dave. I'm still standing for the people that are going through this. And I'm also still standing for the other former caregivers that are navigating now another journey, you know, a journey to going from we to me. And that's probably one of the most difficult journeys.
A completely new identity.
Exactly.
Completely new identity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we gather and we grieve together. We grieve for one another. We are advocates for ALS, and we still have a lot to give. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of them. They will be my family and lifeline, really, for the rest of my life. Just when you are bound by a disease like this, there's no other way to say, but we are brothers and sisters.
Yeah. So what's on, I mean, if the VA and if the military service is a link, I would love to think that they are just all over this, trying to find what's the cause. If they're, I mean, those statistical numbers of the people that have it, that are in the military, is incredibly high. I mean, what do they think could be the reason for that?
Gosh, I would love to think that too, Claire. I would love to think that this whole country, because it is such an innovative country, is all over this. But again, you said it. It is considered a rare disease.
Yeah.
So it's not on people's forefront of their minds. It's not something people are aware of. But let me give you a few statistics. In the US, you have a 1 in 300 chance of getting ALS. So
that
if you
seems
don't,
high to me.
It
Seems
is
high.
It is high. It is high. And if you don't already know someone, you will know someone. So, and the prevalence is on the rise, as I told you with the statistics of the military. There are more and more people being diagnosed all the time, and at a very young age. It's getting younger. It's getting more prevalent, and so recognition is getting more, and that's what we need. I will say that Lou Gehrig is the one we all look to and recognize. It's been 80 years since he passed, approximately, and there are more drugs in the pipeline right now for ALS than there ever have been. The problem here is getting them to an FDA approval and getting them in the bodies of people with ALS. The most frustrating thing to me is you are diagnosed with a terminal disease. There are drugs out there they are trying to find. All of our military guys, as is a DNA of a military guy, are willing to step up and say, put the drug in me. Let's see what happens. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I've already been diagnosed terminal. But our powers that be in this country tend to overprotect us a little bit and will not allow that. So there's a fight. There's a fight to get these drugs that are working for some in the bodies of anybody who wants it, and see the outcomes and have more data to study and then learn more about it. And in the end, have a treatment for it.
So how did someone like Stephen Hawking live so long with this disease? I mean, he lived 20 years.
Yeah, he lived 50 years. Yeah. There is a 10% spectrum of people who live long. It is slow progressing. They are able to slow it down. We all look for supplements, for different things we can do to try and slow it down. And although I don't know the details of how he went about it, I know he was a brilliant man. And I know he stayed ahead of it, I think. I think early progression was quick. And then he was able to slow things down quite a bit. And really, in the end, if you, as we all have seen pictures, he was locked in, but found a way to still communicate with eyes and technology and devices.
The technology was amazing. And yeah, you talked about the brain and the mental function still being as high as it ever was. And here's Stephen Hawking, and he's like talking about black holes, and he's, he's leading that science till the very end. It's just,
he is.
Really
so think of all the other minds and the things that they can do. And they're getting quieted, too soon.
Well, and I also, because of doing research on you and the mutual friend that we have, I found out about Jeremy, who is running for Congress, so again, there is a whole amount of time of quality of life and giving and contributing and stuff, even with this disease.
Jeremy is a typical military guy. He was diagnosed shortly after the birth of his 6th child. He was in medical school at the time. And he has gone on since being diagnosed with ALS to get his PhD. He's only the 2nd person ever to do that. Stephen Hawking was the first. And he is confined to a wheelchair. He uses a speech device. You guys were graciously interviewing him, and it was a great interview. And it's a great way to learn the abilities that you have as an ALS patient. You still can contribute greatly. And as you so well said, he's running for Congress. How awesome would that be if we have someone in Congress with ALS? He's the guy to do it.
Yeah, yeah. No, my mom died of Alzheimer's, and she was physically very, very healthy, but and she was a PhD. She was a published poet. She was a concert level pianist, and
Wow.
it was just really hard to lose her that way. And my father, who had metastatic prostate cancer and COPD and pneumonia, and he had all of these physical things that were going wrong with him, but his mind was just like so alert. And I often, during the 6 years I was caregiving them, would go, which is worse?
Yes.
I really rhetorically in my head would go, which is worse, to be in that kind of pain and suffering that my dad was in, but he had such a social life, and he was he was at a party 2 weeks before he died,
Wow.
and, my mother, who had so much of her life was about her brain power, completely taken away from her, but she was never until she lost the ability to swallow, she really was never in much pain. She really, I just don't know which is worse. I don't know.
Right. I think that's the ultimate question. That's the ultimate debate. It's so difficult. And for Dave, he was a guy of action. I mean, he was brilliant, but he was a guy of action. So to take away his ability to use his hands and arms, and then he had to use the other muscle, his brain, and speak to people and present to people and talk about this and be support to other ALS patients. And so you adapt, a military term, you adapt and overcome.
Wow.
But I agree with you. I don't know which would be worse. They're both so devastating. And interestingly enough, you speak of Alzheimer's. The FDA just approved a drug for Alzheimer's here in the States. And it did not have great trial results, but it had good enough. We have 2 drugs for ALS that had similar trial results, and the FDA turned them down. So there's just frustration on so many levels.
Jill, I think there's safety in numbers. I'm just riffing right here, but it's like there are commonalities with enough progressive illnesses and the needs that those illnesses have, those patients need in that interdisciplinary team of palliative care like Dave got, to have the research and the trials, in a wealthy country like this, in a wealthy country that I'm saying I'm in Western Australia, but I feel it's my home. Yeah. Right. So it's just, there's, my mind often goes to public policy. That's why I was so happy to hear about Jeremy running for Congress. I just think
there are currently 2 bills that are being presented in Congress and the Senate. A promising pathways bill that opens up the ability for us to try those things, and an act for ALS, which is specific to ALS and gets us again to a level where the FDA can kind of change the rules a little bit and pass these things. Obviously, everyone is doing what they can, but I think you are so right. The voices are the most important thing. And having said that, in the same month that Dave passed, Brian Wallach and his wife, Sandra, started an organization called IamALS. And it's a patient-centric, patient-focused organization. All volunteers. We all just come together. He and his wife have done an incredible job of creating a platform for all of us to come together and have our voices be heard. And they are being heard, finally.
That's great. That's great. Well, I'm just so glad I know about these organizations and that I know about you, because I do know people. I do know a couple of people that have passed from ALS, and it's not close proximity to me, but it's. I think I know as many people of ALS that have died of COVID. So it's it's out there for sure.
and it's growing. You know, it's going to get more and more. So again, the whole theme of ALS is to stay ahead of it. We need to stay ahead of treatment and a possible cure before it gets to a size that we can't ignore.
Yeah. Well, and that they have palliative care at the end and that interdisciplinary team. I just, my hat is off to you, Jill. I'm so happy to meet you. And, you know, as people are listening to this, if you know someone that has ALS, if you've been diagnosed with ALS, there is a Facebook group that Jill started. Tell us about that Facebook group, because if they have questions, that's the best way really that they can reach you, or any other places you want to lead them to get more information. Let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this for us. Thank you for allowing me to bring awareness to this. Thank you for letting me share my story. I love sharing my story. It's an incredible man. He made such an impact on so many lives, and I am proud to be his wife, really.
Well, you're an incredible woman. I mean, I'm just going to say that right now. So I'm going to say these organizations that you are part of. So there is IamALS. That's a website.
IamALS.org. And
okay.
I'm going to give you 3.
Okay.
IamALS.org. And it has a navigation team that if you are recently diagnosed, if you have ALS, get a hold of them and they will help you navigate anything and everything you need. I am part of IamALS. You can reach me through there. Also, Jeremy's organization. He started an organization called Smile Inside. And he is obviously a doctor of social work. I sit on the board of that organization. I am proud to be a member of that board. He is happy to talk to you at any time. SmileInside.org. You can get a hold of me through there. You can get a hold of Jeremy, and he can give you firsthand knowledge of being an ALS victim and how he navigates it. And he's happy to talk with you at any time. My group on Facebook is called Still Standing. And it is for people who have lost a loved one to ALS. And we are there to support you, to guide you, to stand with you through this next step of your journey of loss and grief and really remembrance too. Right. We're there for you.
And we'll have all of the links down at the bottom of the description. Okay. So thank you. It was just so nice to meet you, Jill. And I just love the work that you're doing. And you're put on this planet for a reason.
Well, I can't do it without people amplifying our voices like you do, Claire. And I'm just so thankful for that. So thank you for letting me share. It's been great.
It's my pleasure. We'll talk again soon, I hope, right?
Great. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.